Hello, hello. Hello, can you hear me, James? Hmm. I can't hear you. Can you hear my computer's volume, the Zoom volume.
How about now?
Yes, can hear you.
Mm,
Wait, I might have lost you. Sorry, one more time. Can you hear me?
how about now?
Yes, can hear you. Can you hear me? Now I can't hear you. Your mic's sort of
Can you hear me
quiet though.
now?
Yes, it's cutting in and out a
Can you
little.
hear me now?
Yes, that's better, I think. Are you still talking?
Hello.
Hey, I heard that.
Hello.
Yes, yeah, I can hear that. Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, but
I
can
can't
you
seem to
hear
hear
me?
you at the moment, though.
Hmm.
I love technology sometimes.
Hmm. Hello? Hello?
How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, I can hear
Oh,
you.
woo. Thank God.
Oh, that was really weird. I had like shut down Zoom and restart it back up for it to actually detect my mic.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, then the my sound went away.
uh, well, why don't I pull up the I'll pull up the agenda and then we can just jump into it because it's already actually a couple of minutes, so I don't know that anybody else is coming. Um, biggest thing or the antitrust policy notice. So Linux Foundation call. So make sure we're treating each other with respect and whatnot. Um, In terms of announcements, I think the two biggest ones is the timing adjustment, but that's already kind of old news at this point. New news though is our 064 release is out, which I think is really awesome. Thank you, George, for all of your efforts to help make that happen, and also in particular to the ABSA team for all of their contributions that went into that. I wasn't, as I was writing up the summary, I was like, I'm probably missing some major things that was in this based off of my history here.
No, no, it was good. Did you wrote up those release notes, or how does that
Yes.
work?
Uh,
Nice. Yeah, they're good.
the GitHub will like compile all of the PRs that are from the last release you did. So I basically organized it and then gave it a little summary. So
Cool. Yeah, it looked good. And yeah,
thank you.
it's a good couple months of effort, I think, maybe more. That's
Yep.
good.
Yep. Uh, I've updated this as is appropriate. I think the two biggest things of work in progress that I'm aware of that actually have like open PRs is the test harness work, which I want to talk about today. And I was working on fixing the indie did generation there, but I'm running into
Hmm,
issues with the test, so that's still in a draft state at the moment.
cool.
So yeah, what I based off of our conversations, I think we wanted to talk about the test harness today, and then the um Aries-vcx modularity, which has a couple of things underneath of it. Was there other topics you wanted to chat about today?
No, those are the two on my mind as well. So that's good.
Awesome. Well, I want to see the really cool thing, so we should start with that.
Yeah, you had a chance to look at some of the code I put forward.
I thought it looked really good. I haven't I probably should have given it a actual run through now that I think about it. I got slightly distracted, but from the like the high level, just like looking at the code, reviewing it, it looks pretty good to me. I had the one question and I follow it up with there, but
Hmm,
um overall it looks like a good approach to me.
cool, cool. Okay, yeah, I think it simplifies things, and I think it's what we were mentioning in the last call, but just making sure it aligns with what you guys wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question that I don't know if you had looked at my comments. The My one question was in relation to right now, I believe it's going to be doing this on every update to main, which seems appropriate. But that also
Hmm,
means that we don't have from a interop perspective, we don't know is 063, is 064, are those going to be compatible with other frameworks? Um, so I asked about this because I had ideas about it, but I figured I'd ask to see if they had already done things there. And so Akapi actually produces multiple images. They produce one based off of main, and then they produce some based off of, I think, the last release, essentially. Um, so that you can have ones for main, so most up to date, but then also ones for tagged releases. What's
hmm.
your thoughts on us maybe doing something similar? Is that worth doing? Is that a completely separate item to do? What do you think?
Yeah, no, yeah, I just hadn't thought of it, but that makes sense. So does Akapi have like two entries in the test harness listing, and one of them's main and one of them's most recent release or something?
Yes, if we go take a look at repo itself, back channels, Akapi. So they've got this Akapi main. Uh,
Ah,
I think that this one is an older one. Actually, I could probably go look in Discord because I was asking about it in the test harness thing here. Yeah, so the Docker file dot uh, Akapi is for the most recent released version, and
Mhm.
this one is based off of what's on main. So yes.
Okay, I see. I see. So do you mind clicking into the dockerfile.accipy?
Yeah.
Mm, Um, okay, never mind. I didn't instantly understand it, so don't worry.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they have.
Right. Yeah, there's probably more to it. Yeah.
I would
Um,
have expected to see. Oh, there's uh they've got a dash dash version, Akapi version .txt. So I wonder if that gets uh
hmm.
that would be my guess of how it indicates which version, if that's what you were thinking about there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, no, I like it though. That's a good idea. So yeah, I guess we could have two Docker files in this back channel repo. One of them is for main, and I think for that one you could just tag it as latest, and then it's always pulling the latest thing on main, I think.
I
And
think so.
then one which is tagged, and then I guess we'll have to explicitly update the tagged one whenever we make a new release,
I
or
th-
automated way. I think about.
uh we it might be able to be automated depending on how they've got it set up here, because you could say find the highest semver release
Mm,
tag and pull that.
mm,
Um, but that's a little bit more complicated. Like that takes a little bit more work to set up and might be finicky based off of what they have here. So at a minimum, I think we can have the main just point to what's tagged at the latest.
mm.
Uh, and then worst case scenario, we can also update we can manually change which one the release one is pointing to, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, because the way the code in VCX is releasing images for this back channel in my current PR is wrong. It's literally doing it on every new commit that I push. So I'll change that to be on main and be on tags. Uh, but yeah, obviously I had to do it per commit right
To
now.
test it.
So I'll need to change that. Um, but yeah, yeah, I like that. Sounds good.
Awesome. Appreciate the work you've done here. The test harness, not gonna lie, does scare me a little bit. So this is, I think, a really good leap forward in terms of my understanding of how it works, and then also in terms of our support for it. So,
Yes, yeah, definitely scary to me as well, don't worry.
sweet. The other thing was you wrote up this awesome bunch of thoughts here, and we were like, we should talk about this more in the call. Uh,
Yeah.
do you want to start that, or you want me to give any thoughts I have first to kick that off?
Um, yeah, so I guess I'll just sort of summarize this comment that I left, and then we can get into it. But
Yeah,
yeah, essentially this comment is just talking about how the Aries-vcx repo is currently like sort of separated into these modular bits. So there's a bit for non-creds functionality, there's a bit for wallet functionality, which includes storage and crypto. And then there's a bit for ledger reading and writing for indie related stuff and for a non-creds related stuff, your cred defs, your schemas, etc. So it's modularized that way. But then for each sort of these modules, there's at least two different implementations, except for Ledger, which only has the one. But there's two different implementations. So a wallet has essentially an Indie wallet and an ASCAR wallet. and a non-creds has a credx implementation and a non-creds RS implementation. So those are implementations of the trait which represents that module, the interface which represents that module. And then for each of those modules, they're their own crates, and so they have their own feature flags as well. And so when you click a particular feature flag for that, when you're compiling, then it'll essentially only compile the dependencies and the variant of the implementation that you need.
Which
Um,
honestly, coming from other languages, when I was looking into how the traits and feature flags and whatnot worked, is really cool. Like it just it works so much better than any other language I've worked with so far.
yeah, it's cool. You can compile things out and then other things like only compile certain areas of code if you're compiling for a certain architecture. Like I've seen stuff where it switches between iOS and Android architectures depending on what the architecture you're building for is. There's some cool stuff there. Um, yeah, so that's essentially how the repo is structured currently. Uh, and and so another thing to note is that for each of these modules, you can also compile them without any features at all. So no feature flags enabled. And so you would do that when you don't care for the implementations that the Aries-vcx repo, provides. Um, and all you care about is just having access to that base trait. So you want access to the base and non-creds trait or the base wallet trait, and then you go off and implement it yourself. Um, and so the reason someone might want to do that instead of use our implementations is one, maybe they just don't like our implementations and think we can do it better.
Yep.
That's fine. They have the freedom to do that if they want. And two, maybe the dependencies we're using for our implementations just aren't suitable for the environment that they're running in or the setup that they have. So an example that I give in this rambling is for a case like where you're building a like a wallet Aries app within a browser. If you're trying to do that, then something like an ASCAR base wallet might not work because you'll want to be compiling to WebAssembly to WASM. And so then if ASCAR doesn't compile to WASM, then you're kind of screwed if you're not able to turn off that feature and implement your own web-based wallet, which maybe it's just using in-memory storage, maybe it's using whatever storage API is built into the browser. Um, and so that's sort of a justification for why someone might want to turn off features. Um, and so with all that being said, this is in the context of um, essentially currently for all of our non-creds related shapes, so schemas, cred defs, everything in that effect. For all of those objects, Aries-vcx repo has essentially cloned the non-creds RS types, and they've kept only the types from a non-creds RS. And so now we have our own sort of copy paste of what the non-creds types are, but we've slimmed it down to just only be type definitions. And so that way it doesn't carry along with it all of the other non-creds RS dependencies. Some fundamental crypto stuff doesn't have to be imported, things like that. Um, yeah, and so we have that non-creds types crate within this repo, and that's what we use sort of everywhere as our non-creds data types. Um, but it's a bit of a maintenance issue because now we have a copy paste of these non-creds types, which we sort of need to sync with the upstream non-creds RS. So it's it's annoying in that sense, and we haven't really had to do a full maintenance update of those types yet, since we've just been stuck on either a fork of V2 V0.2 of non-creds or on the actual 0.2 non-creds now. So you can imagine when we go up another major versions of a non-creds RS that there might be some change types and it's going to be a
Mm,
maintenance nightmare.
yep.
Um, and so, yeah, with that being said, then the follow-up question is, well, why not just use the non-creds RS types from upstream? And essentially this relates into the context I just gave, where if you're importing the non-creds RS upstream types, then you're also importing all of the dependencies that come with the non-creds RS, and you're essentially forcing it on Aries-vcx consumers, saying you have to compile Aries-vcx with a non-creds RS on board. So we're forcing them to compile, and so then we're maybe potentially forcing them into a corner that they don't want to be in. For example, maybe a non-creds RS doesn't compile for WASM, and now the whole of Aries-vcx can't compile for WASM. Um, yeah, whereas using the non-creds types that we've stripped and put into the Aries-vcx repo, maybe that does compile for WASM, and so therefore our WASM consumers are fine. And this is all very hypothetical. I haven't tried to compile VCX for WASM. There's probably a million other problems with that example. But it's
Yes.
just sort of painting the picture.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And I think it's a uh I think overall the modularity of being able to have traits that we then have implementations for is it increases maintenance and complexity a little bit because you aren't just directly calling functions, but
Mm,
I think it has a lot of upside, especially from a long-term maintenance and uh, as the project scales and matures. It's really, really nice to have essentially interfaces available, you know?
yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, with all that being said, something we mentioned in that thread is sort of the dream solution in my head that I've been thinking about is maybe the upstream non-creds RS should have its own non-creds types standalone crate, and then they themselves consume that crate within the a non-creds RS core, and then it's also something that we can consume as well. But it would be this sort of thinned down version because there shouldn't be too many dependencies required uh, just to construct some types. So maybe that's something that we need to approach the non-creds RS people with and see if they're interested. Maybe they have been thinking about it. I'm not too sure. I'm sort of new to this VCX battle in the non-creds types area.
Yeah, I think that it definitely seems like it could be worthwhile approaching the Anon-Creds RS folks to say, hey, this is a problem that we've identified. Um, is it worth making a lightweight crate? Is that something you're interested in doing? Is that something that like you and I should be looking at doing? Because like we could go and contribute that. Because often, if you want to make something happen, you have to do the work for it, unfortunately.
Yep.
um, but like
Yep.
that is something that we could do. One of my questions is, do you think it's going from your perspective? You might not have looked at it enough, but how difficult do you think it's going to be to separate out the types from an on-creds RS and then update Aries-vcx to use those types instead of our uh, custom crate that we have right now?
Um, I'm not I'm not too scared of it. I think it'll be a matter of how good you are with your IDE and replacing multiple words at the same time, pretty much. Because yeah, we'll have to switch certain import statements to new import statements, and
Got
yeah, no, not how good you are, but how good you are with your IDE.
it.
Yeah, it'll be a good challenge.
Cool. Is that something do you So I have two follow-up questions then. Do you think this is something that has where do you feel this is in terms of the priority of removing that layer or putting it upstream? Is that something urgent or is it uh something less urgent or less I would say it's important. How urgent is it?
Hmm. Um, I don't consider it too urgent. It's going to be annoying when, 0.3 of a non-creds RS comes out and we try to update. That's when it'll start biting us. Um, so one approach is we just wait for that to happen and that we have to update a non-creds RS and we run into all these issues. So then we just rip the band-aid and aggressively pursue this upstream data type approach. Um, Another approach is that, we sort of temporarily ignore all the special WASM building use cases that I mentioned, and we just use a non-creds RS types, immediately and get rid of the non-creds types crate that is within the Aries-vcx repo. Um, And so that's sort of ignoring the arguments I made, but maybe it's not a big deal because maybe we can't compile to WASM already, and there's a whole bunch of other issues. And maybe that's something I need to look into because I need to really figure out how much backing there is behind what I'm saying. Maybe the full non-creds RS isn't that heavyweight compared to what just the thin down and non-creds types is. Um, So that's sort of something that we could try to measure and then decide if we should just move on to pure non-creds RS right now. Um, yeah.
That's
So I
really
guess
good thoughts there because I think that
yeah.
um doing a little bit of an evaluation might help us to determine that, oh yeah, it's not actually adding that many dependencies, or
Mhm.
we feel comfortable adding it, or it's like, oh, this is really heavy and this would be really nice. I think that might help us make a judgment call there. Um, my other thought is I'm theoretically interested in doing the WASM stuff at some point, or at least trying to
Mm.
make that work with Aries VCX.
Yep.
I should say potentially. I'm definitely personally interested, but from a work perspective, I may have the funding to actually work on that at some point. We'll
Cool.
see. Um,
Awesome.
I think that what I lean towards is if we uh, use upstream immediately, it does simplify the I would say I think it would simplify the project because you don't have to interpose our types crate on top of us trying to use the anon-creds RS. So it may be
Mm.
easier to follow the from the code perspective. So it may reduce some of the complexity. Um, but that's partially me coming from a fresh perspective into the code base. So I don't know if that has necessarily has merit, you know.
Mhm. Um, no, yeah, I'm probably down with that approach. Yeah, I will, you know, run something locally to check if we're really bringing in a concerning amount of new forced dependencies, but we're probably not, so it's really fine. So yeah, I'm happy with the switch to upstream now, but in the long term, sort of request that the upstream makes their own types crate, which is thinner than the normal thing. Hmm.
So I think the long-term approach being that we want to have a types crate, I think that makes sense because it doesn't increase, I don't think it increases likely the complexity that much of a non-creds RS in the first place. But it has upside in terms of consuming libraries.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
like from a input, like it's not like it's a whole lot of work for not very much output. It's a little bit of work for a medium amount of output.
Yep. Yep.
um, so I think it's worthwhile bringing that up, like in a GitHub issue on the non-creds RS front. Probably is the right approach.
Yep. Yeah, I think so.
Uh, you might be the best person to make that GitHub issue because I think you are the closest to how the types are working now. Is that something that you feel that you can raise? I feel like you could also articulate it better than I can.
Yes, no worries. I'm happy to do that, and I'll make an issue on the Aries-vcx repo as well to make the immediate switch. And that'll be a task I'm happy to take on eventually after the AATH stuff, probably.
Awesome. Thank you. It's
No,
really good to uh, talk through all this. So.
yeah, for sure.
So, related, so we went down on a little bit of the rabbit hole on the Anoncreds RS types. Uh, what's your thoughts on? I don't want us. I don't. I think that we should keep the. We should definitely keep the traits around, but do we want
Mm.
to keep the implementations for Credex, in particular the older Indie VDR tools, Indie SDK, whatnot, and or whatever's in legacy. Because my thoughts here is that they're essentially the old repositories, um, or projects that are no longer being supported and are deprecated from a overall community point of view. So I don't necessarily want us to have to continue supporting those, especially from a wallet storage perspective, because
Mhm.
uh, supporting continually supporting migration tools between storage interfaces is a gross time. So if we could just xnay the indie storage format now, that seems like a good idea from my perspective. I might be missing things though, so what's your thoughts here on this?
Um, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm not sure if the only concern is, other people if they're out there using these old dependencies. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, like I think Absurd, Patrick and others had built a whole bunch of migration tools, presumably because they were trying to move off the legacy stuff to the new stuff. But that's not really a concern anymore. And so arguably all the legacy stuff and the migration tools was just for Abs's use. Um, yeah, is I guess we'll need to try to find out if there is other people out there who are using these. And if we're able to confirm that, there's probably not anyone, then yeah, let's get rid of them sooner than later. And also, I'm not sure what the formal approach to like announcing these crates are going away is. So yeah, do you have any recommendations on how we could approach that?
Um, we're one of my thoughts is to do the two biggest, three biggest places. I would have us start by posting something in Discord because that should be
Mhm.
where we're trying to have the bulk of community interactions.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I could also raise this potentially in the Aries working group call because that may also be where other people are present and can express that they're having issues. And then also, thirdly, if people are utilizing uh, Aries-vcx and they're not attending these calls or um, reviewing what's happening or participating, there's a certain amount of we can't. Uh, if we give an appropriate amount of notice of like I don't know 2 to 4 weeks before we actually officially remove them and we haven't heard anything, there's not too much more that we can do. Um, I think it's significantly different if we were on like a production release. in that
Hmm.
I intend this to be able to be used in production contexts, but this is right now we're still on a 0.64. If we were on a 1.0, I think that we need to have backwards compatibility and whatnot. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility than if we were in a long-term stable release point, you know.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, happy for us to pursue that. It sounds
Cool.
good.
So I can probably take on some of that of communicating in the um communicating, deprecating slash removing the uh indie wallet credx, and those are the uh so I can take out the effort of communicating, deprecating, removing of features slash crates from Aries-vcx
Mm.
in Discord Aries working group call here. Um, I want to make sure we're so I can communicate correctly. This would be the Indie wallet credx, and then are we using Indie VDR or are we using Indie SDK for the ledger piece? I haven't looked as much on the ledger code yet.
I think there's nothing on the ledger side. I think our only ledger implementation is Indie VDR. So
Good.
that's the latest and greatest, I suppose.
That's really good. So I think really then it's uh, Indie wallet credx. Well, I guess we also have um,
Like the migrators.
oh yeah, the migrators, because I think that the migrators may be difficult to maintain if we don't have both implementations, because I think it ends up relying on both, if I remember.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, the
there's
migrators could go.
so it's also probably this guy here. These two um,
Yeah.
and this says libvdr tools. Is this actually doing ledger behavior? Like we're pointing to that, or is this is this is just the Indie SDK essentially
It's
renamed
in
to
the
this?
SDK. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. I know.
uh, Indie SDK uh, legacy directory. Oh, and wallet migrator. I think that I think the biggest ones to me are the Indie wallet and whether or not we need to maintain a migrator, because I uh, would prefer not to.
Mhm. Yeah. No, definitely me too. I do think that it was just an ABSA thing. So we're probably all good to get rid of them. Let's see
Okay,
what the community says, I guess.
cool. That is good to hear. Awesome. Um, one of the uh one of the items I wasn't sure if today would be a good time to talk about it, so I didn't write it down. But um, I wanted to get your take on right now in Aries-vcx, uh, in that actual crate, our storage mechanism. There's actually a fairly large doc on essentially one of the things I don't know actually know where that document is in all of this. Uh, the moral of the story though is there's a doc detailing that we want to have our our records are essentially not storing whether or not we have sent or received uh, messages. We're only saying whether or not we have created them, for instance, um, and leaving uh, the whether or not we've sent them up to the higher level to
Mm,
handle. And since I'm trying to work on towards making a framework that's on top of
mm,
what's there now, that's going to need to be able to handle whether process whether or not we've sent something or not. Um, so that also leads me to the thought of, do I really want to end up duplicating like or have another storage layer to indicate whether or not we've sent messages or not? Or do we, because either we have another storage layer that indicates for every essentially thread of messages like a credential exchange, we would need a record that indicates whether or not we've sent it yet and potentially other details. But that's
mm,
duplication of stuff that we're already storing within Aries-vcx. The alternative is to adjust our existing message records to be able to uh, handle whether or not we've injecting information like sent status information, whatnot. So I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. Those are the two sides that I see. I kind of wanted to get your general sense on what your feelings are there. Um,
mm.
that was a very rambly question for you.
No, 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 no. I think that makes sense. So yeah, essentially, as you said, we're not doing the sending of messages for Aries VCX consumers. There you go. So these sort of state machines or handlers that are within the Aries VCX crate, um, yeah, all they're really for is holding some state in memory, and then you throw messages that you've received and decrypted into this state machine, and then it'll give you an output saying that's good. You can transition to the next state. Here's a message that you should send back to the party on the other end, or whatever state transition happens. But yeah, Aries VCX isn't actually storing anything at
Oh,
all when
is
it
it?
does the
It's
state
just
transition.
doing this in memory. So essentially, it is very. It's more like a uh functional programming where you plug in whatever Aries message you've got, it returns out an Aries message that you should return. Doesn't actually hold any long-term storage of your messages that you've exchanged.
Yes, exactly. So the way that an agent or a framework on top of this would most likely work is, you construct the initial state machine, you do whatever you need to do, get the message out, and then you get the updated state machine in your like in memory. And then you would send that message firstly to the peer, but then you would write the state machine's state in your database or wherever you're storing it. And then once you receive a message back, you decode the message, see that it's for some thread. You have some way to look up that thread ID in your database and determine that it relates to this state machine. And then you reconstruct the state machine in that updated state from the data that you have in your database. So it's just sort of a back and forth between database storage and reconstruct the state machine so that you can continue, and then serialize the state machine again and chuck it back into your database. That's sort of a approach that we've thought about.
Hmm. I think that makes some pretty good sense. I think I'm gonna have to think about this more now. I think that the my only concern off the bat is uh mm, no, this is essentially what we were doing in somewhat doing in Credo. Credo focused on you have essentially um a structure of like an object for a given any given protocol, and
Mm,
given that record, you can then call a given function of like I want to accept this offer and in relation to this structure, and then that would spit out a credential offer. Well, actually, it would send it for you and everything too, but similar
mm.
concept. Um, so as long as you could. Uh, Because at a bare minimum, what you would need to do is hold on to all of the Aries messages, and then you could theoretically recreate the same mm, state machine to determine what your next step should be.
Mm.
So I think that should work in theory, and it's not duplicating storage like I was kind of worrying about. Um,
Yeah, because maybe did you misinterpret that the state machines were storing bits in a database?
yes, I hadn't looked into it enough to determine that. I've
Yeah, no,
taken a
no,
little bit
no.
of an odd approach here of trying to. I've been poking at just the whole repo and various different points to try and get a handle across all of it, and then going deeper on very different individual pieces of it at a time. So it's
Mm.
been a little bit of a weird approach.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and so I guess the Aries-vcx agent crate that is within this repo as an example and used in the back channel is sort of what I just described, but the database that it's storing these state machines in is an in-memory uh, database. So it's storing state machines in some in-memory database, and then whenever it gets a new message, processes the thread ID, sees that it should be this state machine, so therefore it pulls it out of memory or pulls it back into the scope of the code and executes on that state machine to transition it to the next step, etc. But yeah, I think even in the Aries-vcx agent example crate, um, the they've like defined a trait for storage, and it just happens that the way they've implemented the storage is in memory currently. But I think theoretically, if you swapped it out, this is a very simple storage trait as well. You'd probably want something more complicated for the framework. But
Yep.
you could implement
Uh,
some
uh,
SQL database as well instead of an in-memory one, and then you're close to having a framework.
yeah, no, like doing a trait, I think makes is really a really good idea when it comes to the storage here.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so cool. I'm that um helps me get a little bit of a slightly better idea of how to approach the framework. Um, so thank you.
Mm.
I will need to think on that some more. I may have some follow-up discussion.
Yes, yeah, for sure. For sure.
uh, yeah, I think that's the what I had today. Well, I know I'm forgetting some things that I was like, I should talk to George about that. But that's all I could remember. Is there topics you had?
Um, No, no, yeah, like I mentioned, AATH and the modularity stuff is really what I wanted to cover with you, and I think we've done a good job of doing that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so some action items for me is to create the Aries-vcx ticket for switching to pure non-creds RS types,
Yep.
and create a related issue, probably with the upstream and non-creds RS guys, seeing what they think about the idea of separating the types into their own crate.
Yep.
Cool.
Uh,
Okay.
Related for me is to do the communicating about us deprecating slash removing the indie wallet, wallet migrator, CredX, indie SDK in all of its capacities.
Cool. Yep. Sounds great.
Awesome. Uh, as per always, if you have PRs and whatnot, I'm happy to take a look, and so just continue to ping me. So
Sweet. Yep. No, likewise. Sounds good.
awesome. Thank you, George. You've been quite helpful. Uh, and we'll talk to you at least in the next 2 weeks.
So, yep. Sounds good. Nice chatting.
See ya.
Okay. Bye bye.